On today's show, we've learned that Evan Mobley might be a different beast this year for the Cleveland Cavaliers. What else do we know after 2 weeks of Cavs preseason basketball? I've got Spencer Davies here with me. We're going to talk about it on this edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like The Inside Shot, my new Substack, Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, a number of other stops along the way. Joined today by Spencer Davies of Cavaliers on SI. We've got a great show lined up for you today, but first I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Make sure you drop us a 5-star rating, leave us a nice review as well. Also, check us out on YouTube. Just search Locked On Cavs on YouTube. If you're watching this video right now, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and make sure you hit the notification bell so you know when the latest Locked On Cavs content is coming your way. A proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show, of course, is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll be started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. As I mentioned, Spencer Davies from Cavaliers on SI with me on today's show. And Spencer, the thing that we need to start the show with, because we've seen now 2 preseason games, we've got to look at some training camp stuff. We are learning more about this Cavs team every single day, every single opportunity. We get to talk to somebody, we get to see something, we're learning. But the number one thing that I've taken away from the first couple of weeks is Evan Mobley looks like the guy who is taking a leap. He looks like somebody that is going to turn into a monster on the basketball floor. And I think that is the absolute best thing for the Cavs that you could have asked for.
Yeah, and what's the first thing that they mentioned when they were talking about the hiring of Kenny Atkinson? It was going to be the development of Evan Mobley and the development of Darius Garland being at the top of the list. And Evan, as a ball handler, that's going to be a huge part of this offense to unlock. And it's not just being out on the perimeter and trying to expand his range. It's more about, does he have confidence putting it on the floor? How does he look when he's facing up? Is he looking for cutters? Is he able to get his own, knowing when to get his own, making the reads and doing all of that? So I feel like that is what they're going to try and implement in this team with Evan, is just all of those areas. You got to figure it out along the way. There's going to be some growing pains. There's going to be some turnovers, but in the long run, this is what's going to benefit this team the most. And there even might be some nights where Evan leads the team in usage from what Kenny Atkinson's talking about. So that's a complete change from just being somebody in the dunker spot or even just trailing behind. So they're going to use him in all different types of spots. And the thing that I think, looking forward to the most is utilizing him in transition. When he gets the ball off the glass, whether he gets the rebound, whether he gets a block or steal, or he's just passed it in transition, the way that he operates when he's got the ball with momentum. And that, I think, is when Evan Mobley is at his most dangerous. And now that he's added a little bit more weight again, and he has some more upper body strength, that's the way he's going to be able to attack, and he's going to be able to get to the line. And then you open up an entire different part.
For me, I don't even know that what I've been so happy about with Evan, or impressed, I guess I should say, about with Evan, is anything that has changed schematically. Like, there are different things that the Cavs are doing with him on the floor than were done in previous versions of this team. And we can talk about that at a certain point because it is worth talking about. But for me, and you brought up there are going to be nights that the Cavs have talked about where Evan is the team leader in usage percentage. To me, that's not necessarily a reflection of something that's happening stylistically or a schematic tweak that Kenny Atkinson and his coaching staff makes. To me, that is a direct reflection of how aggressive Evan Mobley is, of how much urgency Evan Mobley plays with. I thought we really saw that in the first preseason game against the Chicago Bulls. And if that guy shows up on a regular basis for the Cavs, they're going to be in a really, really, really good spot on the offensive end of the floor. You brought up the added muscle, the added weight. I think that's something that makes a really big difference for him. And I do think, aside from just him being able to do some things physically he might not have been able to do in years past, without that added weight and added muscle. I also think, and Spencer, maybe I'm crazy for thinking this, and please tell me if I am, but I also think that sort of thing, he added muscle, he added strength. I think those things also meant he added some confidence to his game offensively that might not have been there before.
That's honestly what I was thinking when you were talking about it, because you can just see it when you're out, when you watch. Just take the eye test. You see how much he's being assertive, and how he's kind of just taking initiative. Right? He's not for the game to come to him. He's taking the game, and usually when you're a younger player, you're going to want the game to come to you instead of forcing it. But in this case, when you're forcing it, you're making the defenses make decisions. And when you have Darius Garland and and Donovan Mitchell on the floor with you, that's going to really open things up for those guys who are excellent shooters by trade. We know that they're going to be doing walk-up threes, transition threes, off-ball screen threes, and whatever, catch and shoot threes. That's going to just provide an entire different wrinkle for their games, because once Evan finds that niche, once Evan finds out, okay, yeah, I can put it on the floor here and get my own. Okay, well, this time this guy's guarding me this way, so I'm going to spray it out. Or, oh, I'm going to utilize the high-low game and get it to Jared Allen in the dunker. That's the stuff right there that comes with development, and the development can coincide with winning in that case.
Yeah, it absolutely can. Now, there are going to be growing pains, and the Cavs have talked about the fact that there probably are going to be some growing pains with Evan, but I don't think that this is going to be as steep of a learning curve. You brought up the getting out in transition, and I think that kind of pushes us into maybe a little bit of a different discussion about pace, where we saw in the Cavs' first preseason game, they played at an incredibly fast pace. In their second preseason game against the Pacers, which starters didn't play, Karis LeVert didn't play. The only member of the starting five that played was Jared Allen. That pace wasn't quite as quick. I don't think that's a really big deal. But there was a play in transition, and it really stuck out to me in the first game that Evan Mobley made. It was the and one that he had. He talked about how he felt like, he felt stronger, and he could tell on that play. That play, looking back at it, it reminded me, and this is such an unfair comparison for me to make, but it reminded me of what Giannis looked like roughly 18 months before he won his first MVP. Like, that is where Evan Mobley might be right now. I think for Cavs fans, that can be the most exciting thing there is.
And I know it sounds hyperbolic, but they've brought it up. Like, Kenny Atkinson has brought up how Giannis kind of was in that frame when he got momentum in transition. And I mean, even for you, man, you were around Milwaukee. You covered that team.
Well, that's why I said it. Like, I was in Wisconsin covering that Bucks team the year before Giannis won his first MVP, and he was still very raw. And I think Evan probably is a little bit smoother on the outside in terms of his shot at this point in his career. Not that either of them are great, but it reminds me of that. Like, you can tell that he's starting to scratch the surface. And this is a crazy thing to say off of one preseason game, but just watching it was hard not to be blown away by him.
And what's nice too, I think, is that Evan's just not going to be in one position this entire time too. You're going to see him up top. You're going to see him in the dunker. You're going to see him sometimes in the corner. My favorite play from the preseason game was when Jared Allen took a couple dribbles, dished it to him there in the corner. Evan took it left hand, 3 dribbles, dunked on a dude. That right there, I think, was my favorite play of the first preseason game. It was. There you go. You're looking at it right now. It's something that we have not seen consistently, and I don't know if I've seen that kind of burst out of him yet to this point. And that, I think, is another element of this: is he's getting quicker, he's getting stronger.
Right.
That's
yes.
just these are elements, and these are physical attributes that come with the maturation of not only just his game, but also of his body as a 23-year-old.
Right. And in that clip, and I'll play it again here if you're watching on YouTube, in that clip, like, he blows past Chicago's Nikola Vucevic. And you can say, okay, well, it's just Vuce he's blowing past. And that's fair. It's not as if he's blowing past some all-world defender. It's not as if he's blowing past someone like Jaren Jackson Jr., who he, probably will be matched up against when Memphis comes to town. but it's better than the alternative because last year I don't know that he was blowing past that type of defender. And I think to see that, even if it's just in one preseason game, even if we're only getting a glimpse of it right now, but to see that be what it looks like, I think is so much better than what we've seen from him in the past.
And it's a mentality thing too, because you think about maybe Evan from last year or 2 years ago, maybe he pump fakes on that and tries to take 2 steps into a mid-ranger, or maybe he just pump fakes and tries to, either back a guy down or pass it back out for just another situation where he's not going to take a shot. That's another part of this. There's so many different elements to player development. And I think the fact that he's shown that he's improving in 3 to 4 of those right now can't be a better sign for the Cavs.
No, absolutely not. I think the pace might unlock Evan Mobley a little bit. We've seen the Cavs play at such a fast pace. What do we like? What do we not like about that? Spencer and I dive into that next right here on today's Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is my go-to ticket marketplace. It should be your go-to ticket marketplace. I've got breaking news. I've got great news. Saturday, the Cleveland Guardians hosting ALDS Game 5 against the Detroit Tigers at Progressive Field. I'm going to be there. You're going to want to be there. So if you're going to want to be there, you're going to want to go to Gametime to get tickets because Gametime is an excellent ticket marketplace. And one of the things I love about Gametime, that if you want to go to Game 5, which you should want to do, you're going to want to know what's your view of home plate going to be at Progressive Field at 8:08 for first pitch. Gametime will show you from whatever seats you pick. They will show you what your view of the plate's going to look like, your view of the center field wall. They will show you how your view is going to look. I think that is a very important thing when deciding on where you want to sit, what tickets you want to purchase. Gametime takes the guesswork out of that part. Another thing, and I talk about this a lot because it matters to me, I don't want to be surprised with last-minute taxes, fees, service charge, all of that stuff. I toggle on the all-in pricing feature, and then I'm not surprised at the end of the day. When it comes time to check out, I'm paying the same price that I've been told I've been paying the entire time. I don't want to be bombarded with those things at the last minute. I want to know. I want this to be a straightforward experience, and Gametime does that perfectly. So head on over to Gametime, download the Gametime app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. There's no better time than to use this $20 off your first purchase than this weekend. Again, download an account or download the app, create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you again for making today's show your first listen. You can find Locked On Cavs anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you know when the latest Locked On Cavs content is coming your way. Spencer, on Tuesday night against the Bulls, the Cavs played at a wildly fast pace, which I think is incredibly unsustainable. I thought in watching that, okay, this is very clearly in overcorrection because it's something that can be used. It's a training exercise that can be used to break this team out of old habits where they would play in a much slower pace. I think that was something that worked. And then we see them on Thursday. Again, the starters plus Karis LeVert, except for Jarrett Allen, did not play against the Pacers. The pace wasn't as quick, but I do like that this team wants to make it a priority to get up and down the floor. I think that's a good thing for this roster.
No doubt. It's rebound and run. That's the main element, I think, that Kenny Atkinson's trying to preach. Outlet passes. Looking for guys up the floor. Make sure you go to your corners. Make sure that there's a big that's run into the middle, and then make your decision from there, depending on how it's guarded or depending on if you have a 4-on-3 advantage or a 5-on-3 advantage. That's the stuff that you have to look out for as soon as the ball gets into your hands, whether it's after a stop, whether it's after a steal, a block, or even after makes. Those are big time changes, I think, with this team and looking for that advantage and looking to get into actions quickly. It doesn't necessarily, I thought it was interesting the other night, and you were listening to this too, Kenny. To Danny, but Kenny was talking.
I don't coach the Cavs.
You don't coach the Cavs. I understand that. But Kenny was talking about 3 different speeds he wants this team to play at.
Right. I thought this was very interesting too.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting. So I'm not going to use the metaphor, but basically,
Well, no, use the metaphor. The Autobahn, man. I thought that was
okay,
great. The Autobahn,
Autobahn.
neighborhood driving in the city. That's the 3 speeds.
Yes. So basically, in more simple terms, playing fast, playing at that medium pace, and then being able to slow it down at the end of the game, aka when you get into the postseason and you have to be able to execute in the half court.
Mm-hmm.
When you master all 3 of those, it makes it really hard on the defense to know how to keep up with you, but also how to stifle you from using the actions you want to get into. So that, I think, when we're talking about the transition piece, was the Autobahn. That was
Right.
that was just absolute reckless running down the floor and trying to get buckets. And mind you, their first half was a lot cleaner than their second half, and that even goes with the turnovers and how fast they played in the first half. But I feel like somewhere in between Tuesday and Thursday is going to be their happy spot, as far as just how they want to approach the pace. And I thought that, we're probably going to get into the players, but I thought the time Jerome ran the floor very well tonight. And I thought that,
Yeah,
he looked pretty, comfortable in that and getting it organized. That's the one, area I was asking him about, just because if you play fast, it's probably, you're prone to turnovers. You're prone to people not getting to the right spots just because of fatigue and training camp legs and all that good stuff. But I loved his answer about pace, as far as just like everyone's got a job to do. And you will be organized as long as everybody gets to their right spots. And that's, again, when I was talking about it. You got 2 guys in the corners. You got a guy running up with you. You got a guy filling the floor. And then you got a big that's darting to the rim. Like that's the way you get it done in today's NBA, because it puts a strain on the defense. Okay, am I going to look to the corner where this guy's wide open, or am I going to give up a wide open layup? Right? Like, that's the decision you have to make when you're on the defensive end of the floor. So that's, I think, the big, not necessarily change, but the big emphasis that they're looking at right now.
So, and one of the things, and I want to tie this into how they look defensively too, because I think it's a very interesting conversation. I don't know that I buy that you can play at this Autobahn speed all the time and still be great defensively, which the Cavs, for the most part, over the past several years, have been a great defensive team. I don't know that I necessarily buy that. Last year, there was one team that was top 10 in pace and also top 10 in defense. It was Oklahoma City, who was just a regular season wins machine. Obviously saw some success in the playoffs, not as much success as they would have liked. But do you think that is something that is possible that this team should be striving for? Like, should we be looking, Spencer, at a team that should be in the top 10 in both? Like, is that a realistic goal? Because I'm just not sure that it is.
Well, naturally, when you play faster, you're probably more prone to, again, getting tired and not getting back on transition defense. I think half court defense wise, they're going to be just fine because they have Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. And in some cases, I guess Dean Wade's going to be playing at the 3 when Max Strus
Or the
isn't involved.
5.
Or the 5. Yeah, wherever they want to put him, I guess. But so I think they'll be okay in a half court transition. It might be different because they're going to have to really get their conditioning up, really get that game speed up, and being used to playing that up and down game. Again, not out of control, but also, I mean, it's natural for a body. If you're going to continue to run, then you're going to get gassed at some point, which will lead to a little bit of leakage on the defensive end of the floor. But Kenny said repeatedly that he's gonna lean in to the identity that they already have on the defensive end of the floor. So they're gonna take a step back because naturally that happens when you pay, you up the pace, up the tempo, but they are still not gonna forget where they came from, right? They're not gonna forget what got them to the dance in the first place, and that's the defensive end of the floor and what Jared Allen and Evan Mobley can do. But again, I mean, this is all dependent on what lineups they have in there too, because he's got 2 lineups he's looking at right now that he consistently talks about: the big lineup and the spread lineup, and those are 2 completely different styles, offensively and defensively. So we're going to get good looks at that, I bet, in the coming weeks.
I'm very curious what kind of pace He wants the big lineup to play at, and I'm curious what kind of pace he's going to want the spread lineup to play at.
Mm-hmm.
We've mentioned now, Spencer, 2 role players for the Cavs, Dean Wade, Ty Jerome. I want to talk about how they fit into this roster because I think it's fair to have been there's been a lot of really good talk about those guys. So we're going to do that next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. I talk about FanDuel a lot on Locked On Cavs because FanDuel is, of course, America's #1 sports book. And I need you to know that you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, like maybe you got a hunch in the middle of the Cavs preseason game against the Pacers Thursday night, you can head on over to the FanDuel app and you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. That page, of course, in the FanDuel Sportsbook. Now, I've been talking about the regular season win total for the Cleveland Cavaliers. FanDuel's got it 48.5. I like the over. I do. I think this Cavs team is going to be a regular season wins machine. I think Evan Mobley is going to take the leap that's going to push this team to the next level. FanDuel's got it at 48.5. Maybe you believe me, maybe you don't, but FanDuel's the place to go. Plus, right now, you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet with FanDuel. Again, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with your first $5 bet with FanDuel. That sounds like a pretty good deal to me. I think it should sound like a pretty good deal for you. So head on over, download the FanDuel app today, or go to FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com today, and you can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. If you're watching the show on YouTube right now, hit that thumbs up button for me, click the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of the latest Locked On Cavs content. Also, make sure you tell a friend to subscribe to the Locked On Cavs podcast wherever you get your podcast. Cavs basketball is back. You've got what I think is some pretty great Cavs content. I want your friends, I want your family, I want everyone you know that's a Cavs fan to have some pretty great Cavs content as well. So, Spencer, there's been a lot of conversation about Dean Wade in particular from inside the Cavs, just organizationally. I think a lot of guys are really high on what Dean Wade can bring to this team. I think it's very interesting what his positional flexibility, if you will, where we saw him play the 3 in the first preseason game. We also saw him play a little bit at the 5 in the first preseason game. I do think he is, and I've said this a few times, and it feels odd to say because he's not one of the most talented guys on this roster. Like when you think of the star players of this roster, you think of Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland and Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. But Dean Wade, oddly, is, I think, almost as irreplaceable as those guys.
That's an interesting take, but I get where you're coming from just because.
Well, do you want me to explain it?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so I think he is almost as irreplaceable as those guys. He's not on that level, but say Darius Garland gets injured and has to miss some time.
Yeah, no, and I think for Dean, the way that he's going to make his money is just by being that versatile guy like you were just talking about. He's just able to play the 3, the 4, the 5, and he's able to stretch the floor really, and that's the big part, and that's the big element to what he can bring to this Cavs team is just that flexibility. And that part, I think, when you bring in somebody who's able to defend the way he does, who's able to rebound the way he does, and shoot the way he does, that is a very, very great skill to have. And I thought it was great when Tristan Thompson was talking this morning at shoot around about this kid can effing play, is how he said it. which I thought
he was very explicit in his descriptions of what he thinks of Dean Wade. He used some
he
words we're not
was.
allowed to say on the podcast.
He was, yes. A lot of F-bombs were being dropped, but it was basically just saying, make sure that you let the clip fly, you let it fly. And even in Thursday's preseason game, he did not let it fly as much as they wanted him to. They're talking about how he was pump faking a little too much. And this is something that even with JB Bickerstaff, that they were trying to get him to shoot more and more and more because he just feels like he has to get the quote unquote better players or the scorers the ball more. But on this team, he should be getting these shots up, especially if he's going to be a big part of this rotation. And then once they start guarding him on the outside a little bit closer, that's when he can put it on the floor and attack. And he has the ability to do it because he is a strong dude, and he is a little bit quicker than I think people give him credit for. And not to mention the athleticism, we know the guy can dunk. We saw it against Boston. The Boston game showed you everything that Dean Wade is capable of. Does he do that every night? Hell no, because that would be just an insane.
If he did, he'd be
leap.
making a lot more money.
Exactly. But the capability is there, and he should be letting it fly that way. And be damned if it doesn't go down. It's a good shot to have. He's got a great shot profile for Kenny Atkinson, especially as a small ball 5 or a big 3.
So the last thing I want to talk about on today's episode of Locked On Cavs, Spencer, is Ty Jerome. So he was the starting point guard on Thursday night in the second preseason game for the Cavs, was on the roster last year, played, I think, 15 minutes in 2 games because of a pretty nasty ankle injury that basically cost him his entire season. But he looked to me on Thursday like he's starting to figure out the feel a little bit more, that he's starting to get going a little bit more. And this is sort of coming back to him. I was really impressed with the way he sees the floor. Like, he had 8 assists against the Pacers. I think he's a very viable option for that third guard position.
Yeah, because, I mean, think about what they haven't had in a while. They haven't had a big guard like that. Think about it. He's a 6'5". Like that.
I mean, you could maybe call Karis LeVert that, but I just think they're so different as players.
Very different, very different. And like Ty Jerome's not like a scoring machine the way that Karis LeVert is. Ty's more of a combo, I would say, and Karis is more of a 2/3.
Sure.
Ty obviously can shoot the heck out of the ball, but he's got great vision. His IQ is through the roof because of the time he spent at Virginia under Tony Bennett. A great program, brought up a lot of guys that made it to the NBA and are currently pros still. Ty is very heady, and I think that he's always going to be constantly looking to push it up the floor. We talked about organization. We talked about structure. This is somebody who's a vet, who's been around the league a little bit, and can kind of get guys in their spots, can call out spots, be a little bit more vocal out there and help find those guys, and if not, get his own shot. He's got a nice little, I'll tell you what, man, he's got a nice little one dribble pullback step, and it's nice looking. Like it's a space creator for himself, which with a guy that can shoot the way that Ty has been able to over his career, that's a big weapon to have. Now, are we going to see Ty Jerome on the floor together with Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland? Probably not. But when one of them is off, or even both of them is off, I would imagine if both Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell are off, that Evan Mobley would be on the floor. But in that case, I bet
Jared
you
Allen. But like, I thought Ty and Jared Allen looked good together on Thursday night.
Yes, absolutely. And I asked Kenny about that after Thursday's game, and he's like, "Yeah, I think he found his roller." And it's somebody who can catch the ball in the pocket, somebody who can catch a lob. He can throw it to Jarrett, and Jarrett can outlet it to the corner because Jarrett's a great short roll passer. This is a really good combo for those two on the offensive end of the floor. And I mean, Ty raved over him in the locker room, and it seems like Jarrett likes the way he plays, and they haven't played too much together in games, but they know each other.
They do, and I think it benefits Ty that he played. Obviously, when Ty was in Golden State, Steve Kerr's the head coach, but Kenny Atkinson was on that staff. So there's a familiarity between those two that I think gives Ty. I think that's something that helps out Ty, because not only is it tough to come back from what he's coming back from physically with the injury that he had last year, but it's also tough as a lead guard to learn a new offensive system. I don't think Ty really, I think he's ahead of the curve there, because he has a familiarity with the way Kenny Atkinson thinks because of the time they spent together with a different organization. And of course, you can say the same thing about Jarrett Allen there. You can say the same thing about Karis LeVert there, but those guys are more known quantities, where to Cavs fans, Ty Jerome is somebody that, he's sort of, I don't want to say he can be looked at as an offseason acquisition from this summer, because I think that's sort of giving a free pass in some ways to the organization for not doing something. And that's not what I'm trying to do. But I think he can almost be a little bit of found money for this team, if that makes sense.
Yeah, he's the MVP of September, as Kobe Altman put it, right? Like, I mean, if he came back and look, they tried everything last year to try and get it back. They tried the PRP injection. They tried to let it heal on its own, and the ankle just wasn't getting better. So they ended up having to get surgery in January, and that sucked because he had to miss the whole season. But they really liked when they brought him in, just again because he's a lead guard. He's somebody who's a little bit bigger for the position at the one, and is able to shoot the ball and set guys up. And every team needs someone like that. And if you're getting into good graces with Kenny because, one, him, like you said, and two, I think that there's a trust factor there when there's somebody that he's seen do it. He's seen do it before in Golden State, and that's big time, I think, for Ty and for Kenny to have someone to lean on in situations like that. And with Ty too, I think finding that game rhythm, that game speed is very important. I mean, you miss an entire season. It's not like you can just jump back onto a bike after you fall off. You gotta take some bumps. You gotta figure out, can I still put pressure on this ankle? Can I get up down the floor like I used to? Can I defend? Can I shuffle? Like, these are real elements to returning from injury. And it seems like with these two games that you see even just the slightest improvement from game 1 to game 2, and that's a great sign.
Absolutely. Spencer, thank you for doing this. Very much appreciate the time. You can find everything Spencer does at Cavaliers on SI. Check out their YouTube page as well. They've got a lot of great stuff going on there. You can find him on Twitter at Spin Davies. Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. It's been a great week of content here at Locked On Cavs. More preseason action coming your way next week as the Cavs have 2 more preseason games before the real thing starts. We are less than 2 weeks away from the Cavaliers playing a basketball game that matters. So be a friend, tell a friend to subscribe to the Locked On Cavs podcast. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Also, make sure you're checking us out on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button for me. Click the notification bell. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss anything Locked On Cavs has coming, and we will talk to you next week.